East Report on Sabahul Muslim.
James, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Good to be with you as always.
So U.S. officials are debating ending the boycott of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to try and get Saudi's cooperation on oil prices.
Well, what you're seeing actually is a broader picture, which is that Saudi Arabia and the UAE, like a few other states, including Israel and Turkey, were reticent to take sides in the conflict over Ukraine. And on the other hand, particularly the Saudis and the Emiratis were viewed as very important because they had the capability to increase oil production and therefore help reduce the price. U.S. President Biden has been seemingly willing to go quite some length to get others to raise or to bring oil onto the market. So he was willing to potentially lift sanctions on Venezuela. Whether or not this will have impact on the Iranian nuclear agreements, we'll have to see. But he was willing to sort of lift his personal embargo of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. But he didn't get a response, neither from the Emiratis nor from the Saudis. In fact, he got a public rebuff indirectly from the Saudi Crown Prince in an interview that he gave to The Atlantic. You're now seemingly starting to see a change. So the UAE this week became the first OPEC member to say that it would increase its production and that it would encourage other OPEC states to do the same. With other words, the staying on the sidelines in a conflict where the ability to hedge is becoming smaller and smaller is starting to turn against countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and they're realizing it.
Now, Turkey and Israel have emerged as mediators in the Ukraine conflict.
Sure. So you've had both Turkey and Israel, for different reasons, also trying to hedge their bets in the crisis in Ukraine. Now, they have used what others don't have, the fact that they have very close relations with both Russia and Ukraine to mediate. I don't think that either party really thinks that it will be capable of finding a mediated solution, at least at this point in the Ukraine conflict. But it projects them as mediators. It projects them as doing something, and that buys them some space to hedge their bets rather than choose sides.
The UAE has been placed on a global watch list for money laundering and terrorism.
Indeed, and this is another of those issues that's getting sharpened by the Ukraine crisis. So the UAE has long been suspected of being lax on money laundering, primarily money laundering more than finance of terrorism, frankly. With other words, if you're a Russian oligarch today and you're seeing that happen, Dubai is a place to go. At the moment, there are at least 3 super yachts owned by Russian oligarchs that are off the waters of the UAE. There's at least $25 billion in real estate owned by Russian oligarchs, some of whom are on now the U.S. and European sanction lists. Amid all of that, the UAE has been placed on the grey list, the watch list of the international watchdog, the Financial Action Task Force. It joins countries like Pakistan and North Korea. And the UAE is going to have to do quite a lot, and Ukraine may become the litmus test to prove that it is improving its procedures.
Yeah, I suppose Roman Abramovich would wish that he was set up in the UAE rather than in the UK. Anyway, Saudi Arabia and Indonesia...
Actually, if I may, he's setting up in the UAE.
Okay. So Saudi Arabia and Indonesia now differ over the definition of so-called moderate Islam.
Indeed. So going back to the interview that I mentioned about in the Atlantic with the Saudi Crown Prince, he basically declared himself the arbiter of Islamic law on the grounds that he was the ruler. And, of course, that the ruler deserves to enjoy absolute obedience, which he basically hinted at. And he has the prerogative to determine what Islamic law is. It's a very autocratic interpretation of moderate Islam, whatever that may be, that serves Mohammed bin Salman's purpose. Now, at the very moment that he gave that interview, the leader of Nahdlatul Ulama of Indonesia, the world's largest civil society Muslim organization with 90 million followers, very influential group, gave an interview in which he projected the exact diametrically opposed of what constitutes moderate Islam and what needs to be done to achieve that. So he defined, fundamentally paraphrased in my words, moderate Islam as promoting a pluralistic society in a democratic environment, and cautioned that there are elements of Islamic law, of Sharia, that he views as obsolete and no longer proper in the 21st century. Concepts like the kafir, the existence still in Islamic law of the concept of slavery, the concept of the dhimmi, and that it was time to reform and recontextualize those obsolete, in his view, elements of Islamic law. So what you're seeing is a fundamental discussion and debate about where Islam should be going in the 21st century and how you should be achieving that.
James, as always, thank you for your time. Have a great week.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We remind our listeners you can go to jamesdorsey.net to check the latest James Dorsey articles and subscribe to his newsletter.